You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for being here today. I'm Kirk Mona, and joining me are Rachel Gimza and Victoria Thompson. We're all naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders, just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with Kirk and Victoria again. It's always a pleasure and a joy.
Oh my gosh.
Just so
yes,
fun.
This is
it absolutely is.
Highlight of my week. I hope it is the highlight of our listeners' weeks as well.
It brings me such joy.
For sure.
It's great. As many of you know, I was just in the Redwoods National Park, which is the reason why a few episodes ago I was gone for 2 episodes.
That's right.
It's hard, believe it or not, to bring recording equipment onto a plane when you only have a carry-on and are going to be gone for a week. So
that's fair.
Yeah, so I just dipped for 2 episodes to gaze in wonder of these beautiful trees. And if any of you haven't gone to Redwoods National Park, I highly recommend going out there at some point in your life. It's truly astounding. Patron of the show, as well as my best friend Amanda, she nearly lost me to the tide pools one day, and then she nearly lost me to the trees another day. There was a whole thing. There was a while where she sat on the beach, and I was just like in the tide pools, just like wandering, and she would look up every once in a while and make sure I was still there and hadn't been taken away by the tide. I didn't.
That's good. We don't need to be swept away.
I didn't get swept away, but I was having a great time and watched like a fight happen between crayfish. It was great. So
nice.
There is a reason why I'm bringing this up. Stay with me, everybody. So on our first full day out in California, we drove up from our B&B. We drove up and we found the first visitor center on the southern end of the national park. It was the Thomas H. Kutchell Visitor Center. We stopped and we wandered through their displays and the history of the park, as well as like they had a model of the redwood, of one of the redwood trees, so that way you can kind of see some of the aspects of the habitat and what you'd be looking for. Was really well done. But what makes this visitor center different from some of the other visitor center in the national park is this one is right by a beach. On a beach. And it's between like dunes and wetlands. It's in a tsunami hazard zone or like right next to one, which was a wild thing. What a wild sign to come across of like, you're entering a tsunami hazard zone. You go, what?
Yeah, we don't have those in Minnesota.
Not a thing. Yeah.
So it was, that was wild. But this is like the first, when you're coming up from the south end of the park, it's the first visitor center that you hit. And it's the first spot before you start getting to the more proper like redwood habitat itself. So, of course, we got out, we explore this visitor center, and then we go out onto the beach and we're exploring. I was shocked personally on how cold the water felt. I didn't expect it as well. The waves were coming in, but they weren't coming in very much. So I thought I was safe on the beach, and I wasn't, and I got by the ocean. It was a whole thing. But and I won't lie,
I've been there.
Superior and the Pacific Ocean feel very similar to me in both how cold they were and just like the view looks very similar. While we were wandering the beach, we found quite a few interesting things. We found some fresh raccoon tracks, we found some shells, we found bits of crab that had been eaten. But one thing that we found on the beach was something, it kind of collected up along where you could see the wave had ended. It was where a lot of detritus had been left behind by waves coming up, where like the tide had stopped and started going back. Yeah. It was translucent. It had some lines and it kind of looked like a shell, but also kind of like an exoskeleton or a snake skin shed. It was really thin. It was pretty small, like no more than no bigger than 4 inches, okay, or smaller.
Okay.
So there was a ranger on duty. So I got to talking with them as you do. Amanda went and wandered down the beach by themselves because I was talking with a ranger and she knows better. So we got to talk about environmental education. And one thing I always ask any interpretive person at any spot that I go to is, what is a fun fact you don't get to share very often with guests? It's a really fun question. It leads to great conversation.
Question, yeah.
Exactly. It leads to great conversation. It makes them think, and you get to find out something about the space that you're in or the animal that isn't as commonly asked or known about. So I find out some really interesting things by asking that question. So the ranger, in answer to this question, talked a little bit about redwoods themselves, which I talked about before. But they also asked if I had noticed those thin shell-like things on the beach. And
okay.
I was like, yeah, I did. What are those? And it turns out they are not one creature. They're not a shed. There's something called by-the-wind sailor. Their scientific name is Veela. And turns out
nice and simple. Love it.
Nice and simple. And it turns out we don't know a ton about them. But what we do know is really cool. Yeah. So they show up all the time on beaches. And the reason why is because they are actually like they're a colonial hydrozoan. So kind of like Portuguese man of war. They're not one creature. They're a colony of polyps all floating together in the ocean, which is
very cool.
Really cool. And just like Portuguese man of war, a lot of people think that they're just dried up jellyfish, and they kind of look like that, but not really because they're really small.
Sure, I was almost picturing that when you described them, so it makes sense.
Exactly. But they're not really a jellyfish, but they're in the family of jellyfish. They do have nematocytes, and they can sting, although humans can't necessarily feel it, so we're safe, but don't touch them, I guess. Is wild.
Fair. Let me just ask this question then, Rachel. Had you already touched them?
I absolutely had already touched them, Kirk.
Okay, I figured you had. I
had already touched them. They were dried out, so I was safe.
Yeah. Okay.
So when they become translucent like that, they've dried out and died. So they don't really have any active nematocytes or anything on them anymore. Okay. So I was.
You didn't know that when you touched it, but that's okay.
No, I did not. But I was like, "Ooh, these are fun. What is this?
This is strange. Let me touch it.
Let me touch it." Yeah, that's gonna bite me in the butt someday.
Well,
what is this interesting cone snail on the beach?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. I do. When something is alive, I do tend to just not touch it. Feels more.
Yeah, don't pick up cone snails.
No, I don't want to pick up a cone snail. I don't want to. I also get especially since this podcast, I don't really touch fuzzy caterpillars anymore either.
No, you really shouldn't.
Yeah, I learned that more from our podcast, so I don't do that
This is
anymore.
the important things people learn from listening to the show.
Oh, yeah.
What not to touch in nature.
So many things. But what's really cool is, like their name suggests, they are a group of small animals or a group of polyps. And when they're hydrated and actually on the ocean, they're not translucent. They're a deep blue purple.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. They're a really deep blue purple. Think royal blue. It's gorgeous.
What's the name of this creature again?
They're called by-the-wind sailor. They're not very large, like I said.
Name.
It's a very weird name. But there's a reason why it's called like that. They're this deep blue purple, and they're generally in the shape of a disc, which is called a float.
Yeah.
And that literally sits on top of the ocean. So that float is a bunch of different polyps. And on top of that float, kind of diagonal on top of it is this little sail that they use.
It's got a little sail
that's
on
really thin, and they use that to move. And underneath that float are short little tentacles that they use to catch like copepods and plankton because they're not very big. But the polyps
These are
do need
so
to eat.
cool looking.
They're
These
so
are
cool. They're
looking.
beautiful. And I'll definitely have photos up on our Instagram and everything. I'll even include one that I found because I did find so many of them, and I found I took a really cool picture, if I do say so myself. But yeah, so they float along the surface of the water, and unlike the Portuguese man of war, they don't, or even like many other cnidarians and like jellyfish, they don't drift with the current, they drift with the wind. So that sail is legitimately a sail. That's how they move around on the ocean, not with the current, but with a sail.
Really amazing.
Which is really phenomenal, and it like is catching and it propels them around the ocean. We don't know a ton about them. There's still a lot to be learned. There's some knowledge about their life cycles, and it's really cool. There's some other things. I'm getting really long on this, so I won't go too much more into this. There's some science that says that one of the bivalves are all female polyps and one can be all male. And it's interesting, but they can also reproduce asexually. So it's weird. They're very bizarre, but they were very cool to see.
Very cool.
And
very cool.
The fact that they just drift along the top of the ocean, like that barrier between, like, is really amazing. And eventually they get propelled around the ocean, and eventually they will potentially get blown onto the beach where they dry out and will be discovered by an exploring naturalist named Rachel. And that's what I have for you today.
So
amazing.
Cool. Thank you so much.
I'd never heard of that creature. That's super cool.
I hadn't either. I had no idea what we had stumbled upon, and it was truly so cool because once you spot them, you see them everywhere. I did go and immediately shared all of the things I learned with my friend Amanda, who knew what I was doing and thought I had gotten lost in the visitor center. So,
I mean, that's also possible.
That is also possible, yeah. So my sources this week were the National Park Service had a great article on this, Wildlife Trust, National Marine Sanctuary, Jelly Watch, and Wikipedia. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, it'll be Victoria.
How realistic are the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park? My name is Dan, host of Based on a True Story, the podcast that compares your favorite Hollywood movies with history. I had a chat with the paleontologist who consulted on all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies to find out the real history behind the dinosaurs we see in the movies. And it doesn't stop there. From Indiana Jones and Pirates of the Caribbean to Saving Private Ryan and Tombstone, if you've ever wondered how much of your favorite movies really happened, head on over to basedonatruestorypodcast.com to find out. Once again, that's basedonatruestorypodcast.com.
Hey, we're back. About 15 years ago, Harvard entomologist Piotr Naskreki was alone at night in the rainforests of Guyana. He went out alone so that he could be as quiet as possible while he was searching for katydids, which I know Rachel and Kirk, you know what katydids are, but some of our listeners might not.
I got bit by one of those once.
I bet you were picking it up though. You asked for it.
I did ask for it. I was holding it. It hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, they basically
it's
look
they're like a big
cricket
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just Piotr and his flashlight, which he would periodically turn off in order to better focus on listening for the sounds of katydids. And while he was doing this, he heard a rustling noise that was very clearly small footsteps crunching in the leaf litter on the ground. And you know how you can kind of estimate the size of an animal by the sounds you hear?
Unless your imagination is running away with you, yeah.
Like a deer is going to sound different than a squirrel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the sounds, Pyotr thought it was probably a smallish mammal, like perhaps a rat. Turned on his flashlight and pointed it in the direction of the sounds. And that's when it was like there was a record skip in his brain. The animal was the size of a rat, and it was hairy, but it also had 8 legs.
What? No. What do you mean, Victoria? Victoria,
I know what she means.
It was the size of a rat, and it would. Oh no.
Even though Pyotr is an entomologist, he had this moment of primal dread as he realized this was in fact a spider and not a rat or a small puppy.
Kirk, you are not helping, by the way. That was awful.
But the dread was quickly replaced by excitement as he realized that he was seeing the elusive Goliath bird-eater tarantula.
That's so cool! Yeah, I'm back in. We're in. Horrifying to discover on my own. So exciting once you get over that guilt, that like intrinsic fear.
Yes, there is something
That's a big spider.
Large spiders. So the Goliath bird eater is the largest spider in the world by weight and body length, and the second largest by leg span. Yay.
Jeez.
Their scientific name is Theraphosa blondie. They are found in the rainforest
because they have blonde hairs?
They could be kind of light brown. There's a range of colors.
Okay.
But they're found in the rainforests of northern South America from Venezuela to Guyana. Guyana? There's 2 Guianas. French Guiana. Yeah, there's Guyana and then there's French Guiana.
Right.
Yeah, that area.
Okay.
They can weigh, get this, they can weigh up to 175 grams or over 6 ounces. Their leg span can be up to 30 centimeters or a foot across.
Oh my God.
Let that sink in for a moment. Let that picture form in your brain.
Just picture that crawling across your face at night.
Okay, I would like everyone to also know that everyone to know that out of the corner of my eye, I saw something go past my window, and I had a moment of deep fear. I don't live anywhere where there's giant spiders like that. It's clearly a raven. I can see it from here. It's a raven, but like that moment of like, oh my God, it's a huge spider.
Yeah, it's outside your window going, nevermore.
Oh, a very literary raven. Well, just to add to the nightmare fuel, these spiders also have sharp fangs that are 2 to 4 centimeters long and can easily pierce human skin or a mouse's skull. Luckily for us, though, the Goliath is relatively harmless to people. While their bite obviously can be painful, the venom does not affect humans very much, so it's like comparable to a wasp sting.
Okay.
They're also not very aggressive, and they give what?
I'll still pass.
Yeah, no thanks. I mean, I don't like being stung by a wasp either. No. They're also not very aggressive, and they'll give several warning signs before striking in defense. So first, they can rear up to make themselves look even bigger. Then they'll hiss.
They're already big.
Yeah,
they don't need to look bigger.
So you probably don't think of spiders as making noise, and they don't usually, but the Goliath is able to make a loud hissing sound by rubbing its hind legs against his abdomen, and the bristles rubbing against each other create the noise, which brings us to the other defense mechanism, the bristles. So speaking of fuzzy caterpillars, as the spider rubs its legs and abdomen together, the hairs will break off and float through the air. And they're, if you looked at them under a microscope, they're barbed like a harpoon.
Of course
they're called urticating hairs. So they cause severe irritation of the skin, eyes, and mucous membranes. Not life-threatening, but very uncomfortable.
Hate that.
So their common name is obviously very dramatic. And while they are capable of eating small birds, and they have been observed doing that, it's pretty rare prey for them. They live on underground, so they live in little silk-lined burrows, and so they eat a lot of invertebrates, a lot of earthworms, large insects. They are nocturnal. They'll also catch and eat small mammals like mice, as well as frogs, lizards, other kinds of amphibians, small reptiles. Yeah.
God, the idea of a spider catching a mouse is just astounding.
I don't love that.
You can see some videos online, actually. We'll keep these as pets. And other types of tarantulas, too. So, it's something else.
Sure, why not?
If you feel like getting a little shiver up your spine. So, they don't build a web. They're ambush predators. Once they've bitten and killed their prey, they drag it back to their burrow where they can eat in safety. And like other spiders, they inject or spray digestive juices on the prey to liquefy it and then slurp it up.
Gross.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, sure. They probably think pizza's gross too, though. So to each their own.
Yes.
Yeah.
Females and males are similar sizes, but males have a hook or finger-like projection on each of their front legs, which they use in mating to hook around the female's fangs and steady themselves. From that,
they're on the fangs, huh?
Yeah, around the fangs.
Wow.
That said,
that's one way to stop from being bitten, I bet.
Well, that said, unlike many spider species, the females do not eat the males after mating.
That's so considerate.
That's nice.
However, sorry, it's not so great being a male Goliath bird eater tarantula, though, because the males are not much longer for the world after they mate. They die within a few months, and males live only about 3 to 6 years total. Females, however, can live, get this, 15 to 25 years.
What?
Yeah. This was absolutely shocking to me when I heard it.
Wow.
Yeah. This is actually not...
15 to 25 years?
Yes. This is apparently not that unusual for tarantulas,
processing. Though. What? Oh my god.
It's so lots of tarantula females do live quite long. Some species, the females have been known to live up to 30 years. So the males are always shorter lived, but still several years in tarantula species, which is pretty long for a spider. So that is just pretty mind-blowing.
Oh, wow.
The female, after mating, will lay somewhere between 50 and 200 eggs in a special web, which she then gathers up into a large round egg sac, 3 to 4 inches across. That's about the size of a tennis ball.
3.
Which she carries
That's a big egg sac. Like a hobo.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
Very large egg sac.
It's a tennis ball?
Yeah.
Oh, no. No. Ugh.
Yes. The spiderlings hatch in 6 to 8 weeks and take 2 to 3 years to mature. Again, seems very long for a spider, but in the context of their lifespan, makes sense, kind of. Finally, it is worth noting that this is a fairly common species in its range, and it is part of the local cuisine in some places where it lives. Yeah. People singe off the hairs before cooking it, and the meat is said to taste similar to shrimp.
I'd try it. I would try it.
Yeah.
See, I don't like shrimp, so that's not really
I do like shrimp.
Yeah.
I would try it.
Well, if you can let me know how it tastes.
Picked the meat out first for me, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I want to crack open a tarantula. But is it that different from a lobster,
Brett is going to bring this up at our end of the year show. This is Eat Rider Jacket material right here. He's writing it down in a notebook. Right now. Although you can't, he did specify in that game you cannot change the size, so you really can't ride
No, you
I
crush
don't
it.
imagine you could jacket it either. So it's probably...
Well, you have all of these bristles. Like what a defense mechanism that would be, though. Like no one, you put it on whenever you're feeling very introverted. You just put it on and no one will bother you.
But you would be bothered, I assume. So
yeah.
Right.
Again, pass.
Well,
yeah.
We can only wait and see if this shows up next year's season opener. My sources this week were Piotr Nasgrecki's blog, The Smaller Majority, which is a pretty cool blog, page at the Smithsonian National Zoo. The National Wildlife Federation also had some good information about tarantulas in general, and then Wikipedia. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, it will be Kirk.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm assuming, I'm going to ask you guys a question. The listeners at home can answer as well. I just will remind them that we can't hear you. So, do that without what you will. But
keep trying, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Right. You need to actually reach out to us through different various social media outlets to actually get us to respond. But I'm assuming you've hit two rocks together before, correct?
Yes.
And they make sort of that clacky noise. I actually realized I had two rocks on my desk here. So it's kind of this sound here. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So we've all kind of heard that rock or some, variation on that, depending on the size of the rocks. And,
Kirk, I remind you that we work with kids and they often will hit rocks together. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we hear this sound if we're, if kids are hitting rocks together, or I have been known to hit rocks together myself because why not? It's fun. Mm-hmm. Even if you're like walking on rocks, you hear that same sort of sound, when you're walking through rocks. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to play a sound for you, though. And this is actually not the sound of rocks being hit together. It's very similar, though. It's the sound of rocks being hit with a hammer. Okay. So I want to play this sound for you and get your impressions of what you think. Here it comes.
Kirk.
What? Yeah.
This is not what it sounds like when you. Why do these rocks? Are you sure you're hitting it with a hammer? This is not rocks and hammers.
Yeah, this is a strange sound here. This is what you're hearing is not the sound of the hammer that is making that ringing sound. That is the sound of the rocks.
Why are the rocks making a metallic noise? Is this a sculpture garden? Is that what it is? Are they hollowed out rocks?
No. The sound you just heard was recorded at Ringing Rocks County Park in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And the strange county park is described on a website from the county as BYOH, or Bring Your Own Hammer. And what you'll discover there, if you visit on a nice summer day, is that both locals and tourists will be climbing all over a field of boulders, delightfully smacking them with hammers and listening to the arguably musical nature of the stones. Now, these are known as ringing rocks, and the ringing nature of these rocks was reported as far back as the 1800s. And I'm going to be completely upfront about this so as not to leave you hanging. We still aren't 100% sure why these rocks ring like bells, even hundreds of years later.
Why?
But we do have some good theories. And I'm gonna talk about those.
Okay.
So the rocks sound a bit like bells, and so an early theory was that these big rocks,
different.
In different sizes, are going to sound a little bit different,
like tones or pitches.
Yeah, and that's probably due to shape and size, so we know that. Right. But the thought was because they sound kind of like bells, maybe they have a high iron content, and that's somehow making them actually literally just ring like a bell. And testing early on did show that the rocks are about 9 to 12% iron. Okay. So it's like, ooh, okay. That we could be onto something there. But they're actually a type of basalt, and 9 to 12% iron is about
Pretty
typical
normal.
for basalt.
Yeah.
So we can probably rule out that it is the iron that is making them have this ringy sound. Because there's a lot of basalts here in the state we live in, and I've smacked a lot of it, even with hammers, and it doesn't sound like that. So
Nope.
definitely there's something else going on. Now, I mentioned Ringing Rocks County Park, but these strange rocks are actually found in a number of places in this same area. And a couple of them are now parks. In addition to Ringing Rocks Park, you can find these rocks in Ringing Hill Park in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and Stony Garden Park, which is the largest and it's mostly an undeveloped park. And that one contains several boulder fields full of these ringing rocks. This park, that last one I mentioned, Stony Garden, was actually the meeting place in 1890 for a special meeting of the Bukwampun Historical Society, where local physician John J. Ott gave a musical performance of several songs using a lithophone, which is essentially like a stone xylophone that was made out of these boulders, some of them weighing up to 200 pounds. So these are not small rocks. And that's the 200-pound ones are probably some of the smaller ones. And apparently this is delightful, he was accompanied by a brass band for these songs.
Oh my gosh.
I
And
love it when people have fun.
He smacked the rocks with a brass hammer, and apparently you were able to hear them over the sound of the brass band. So this, they can be quite loud.
Whoa.
Yeah. So all three of these sites are in Pennsylvania. And if you look at a map, you can pretty much draw a line straight through them. So they're all kind of on roughly the same line. So this is a clue that there's something geological going on here. They're all part of the same rock formation. So these stones are all in boulder fields. They all date back to about 200 million years ago, so pretty old. And at the time, the Earth's crust was stretching in the area that is now Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So deep underground, the mantle is stretching, and that allowed hot magma to seep up into what was sedimentary rock and formed an intrusion called a sill. And this happens all over the world. And there were many minerals that were present in that magma, but there's two that are of interest to us today. They are olivine and pyroxene. And they crystallized into like a 10 to 15 foot layer at the bottom of this sill. Now, I do want to point out that the rocks that have these higher levels of olivine and pyroxene, they look the same as the rest of the entire rock formation. You wouldn't necessarily ooh, look at these ones, they're full of crystals. They just had a slightly different composition. And what we think happened is that, millions of years later, when this sill was uplifted to the surface and exposed, this thin 10 to 15 foot layer of rocks broke off from the bottom, and probably because of some of the crystals in there, this layer is maybe a little bit softer, a little more prone to breaking and fracturing, and form much more readily formed boulder fields that then got rounded into boulders than the rest of it, which just sort of stayed as bedrock. So we have these small boulder fields because of the mix of components in this sill to start with. This layer, was kind of helped along. There was a 2 million year long ice age in North America here that ended about 10,000 years ago, and this area was right on the edge of where the glaciers reached. So it was exposed for a long time and exposed to a lot of harsh conditions for a long time that really helped break these rocks up into these boulder fields. This rock mass actually extends over large areas of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, but the boulder fields are much smaller because there's also some very specific conditions that have to happen. They have to be on a hill. Because think about if it was on a flat land, they're going to end up embedded in soil. Right? And if it's on too much of a slope, the boulders are all going to roll away and just leave nothing. So you have to have just the right angle in order to leave a boulder field, but wash away the soil. Because if these boulders were surrounded by soil, it would deaden the sound and they wouldn't ring. So pretty special conditions have to be present in order to create one of these ringing rock boulder fields. So that's the underlying geology. And it's pretty strange, pretty specific what has to happen. But that doesn't explain why they ring, right? I mean, boulder fields are strewn across the world. These ones are strewn across, 1 or 2 states. but it doesn't account for the ringing phenomenon.
Yeah, why is it ringing?
So here's what we do know. And keep in mind, this is all from just one research study back in the 1960s. This has not been replicated, has not really been studied further. But a professor from Rutgers University collected samples of rocks that rang, and also dead rocks from the same site that did not ring. And he brought them back to the lab and cut them in half to see what would happen. But he attached super sensitive, essentially like foil strain gauges to the rocks when they were cut. And what they found out is that the dead rocks didn't show any change when they were cut. But the ringing rocks, when you would cut them, the rocks actually expanded slightly after they were cut.
So they're like under some kind of internal tension?
Pressure?
Exactly. So we think there's some sort of internal compressive force that is sort of holding these rocks in tension, and that is allowing the sound waves to pass through them different than they do other rocks and create that ringing sound. I think this original guy who...
But what would that pressure... What would that force even be?
Just probably from the cooling of the rocks and the way they formed. It had sort of this compressive strain just baked into the rock, essentially. The guy who originally came up with this theory, the guy from Rutgers, whose name I could not find, he thought that it had to do with the rocks kind of sitting out in the sun and forming like a crust on the outside that somehow kind of shrank and squeezed the rock. And nowadays everyone's like, no, because otherwise every rock in the desert would ring like this, right? They sit out in the sun and bake all the time.
Yeah.
We think it's probably something that was basically baked into the rock 200 million years ago that made it this way. And if you break these rocks, the pieces you break off will not ring because they have expanded and boom, that's it. There's no more, that compressive force is gone.
Wild.
Well, but that doesn't make sense either because like the boulders were broken off of something else.
Right? Those broke off something bigger. Now it could be that like the boulders, the fractured lines, like where they broke, were these weaker spots, and like they have to be a certain size maybe to ring. There's, like I said at the beginning, we still don't totally understand this. It has not been studied enough to know why these rocks ring like that. So I told you our best theory is that there's something baked into the rocks in terms of, this compressive force, but it's wholly possible someone could try to replicate this and go, no, that's bogus. The guy mismeasured it. There was they didn't expand at all when we cut them. So the real truth is we don't know why these rocks in this one place ring like this and they don't in other places. Now, I do have a little extra bit of fun for you here. This is not the only place on Earth where rocks ring like this when they are smacked with a hammer. We also have the musical stones of Skiddaw in the Lakes region of England, and two locations in Australia. We have the ringing rocks of, I believe it's Kiandra, New South Wales, and the Bell Rock Range of Western Australia. So there's actually a number of places on Earth where this happens, but it does seem to be quite rare. I guess grab a hammer and go smack some rocks where you live and let us know if they ring like this, because every rock on Earth has not been hit with a hammer yet. So maybe there's some other ones near you. So I will say most of the material I got was from a really well-sourced article on Wikipedia, and the sound you heard was from a YouTube video called Ringing Rock Park by the channel This Week in Solar. So you can check that out for more if you want to hear more of what that sounds like. There's actually lots of videos online of these rocks being struck and what they sound like, and it's pretty cool. They all sound a little different.
Awesome. Thanks, Kirk.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, look, that's this week's show. That's what we have. Grab a hammer, get out there, smack some
Start
things.
hitting rocks.
Yep, just as long as you have permission. And I hope everybody has a great week.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye. Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach us by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can check out our website, strangebynaturepodcast.com, and you can support the show and get ad-free episodes at patreon.com/strangebynature. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.